Hola a todos, ¿cómo estáis? Estamos en directo, ahora sí. Espero que todos estén muy bien. Os agradezco una vez más por estar aquí. Hoy vamos a hablar de un tema interesante. Una vez más estamos con una tutora que ya estuvimos antes y es un tema de si queréis aprender algo más sobre Londres, sobre Inglaterra. Hoy vamos a hablar específicamente sobre Londres y cómo interesante es esta ciudad y bueno, espero que os guste. Antes de empezar, también os quiero decir que aquí abajo en la descripción he dejado un enlace con una promoción de hasta un 35%, ¿vale? Aquí abajo. Si hacéis el clic en esta promoción, tenéis un descuento de 35% en tus planes, ¿vale? O sea que aproveche, este estará activo solo durante unas 3 horas después de esta sesión, o sea que aprovechéis mucho y espero que os guste. Y bueno, como ya sabéis también, aquí abajo os he dejado la descripción también del enlace de la tutora, ¿vale? Si queréis hacer una sesión con ella, aquí también está. Y bueno, espero que os guste. Si tenéis preguntas, por aquí al lado y vamos a empezar. So Sophie, that's go to English right now. So I think we already talked a lot in Spanish, so yeah, let's go. So, I mean, for everybody, some people already know you, but for the ones who don't, and so introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm Sophie. I am English. You might be able to tell from the accent. I live in London, and I've lived here for nearly 7 years now. I absolutely love this city so much. And I've been working as a tutor on Cambly for a good little while now.
Mm-hmm.
I really love it, and I really enjoy being able to share my culture and learn about other people's cultures as well. Which is what I really love doing about these lives as well, is sharing a little bit about my culture with people who are really interested to learn. So I've also done work as a tour guide in London, so I know a few things, not everything. but I still sometimes get questions that I just don't know the answer to. But I know quite a few little bits and bobs about places to go in London and things to look for.
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, especially in a city like London, that there's so much history, and everywhere you look, it's something different. It is a history. It's something that it's there for thousands and thousands of years. I don't know, and it's so much history there. So I can understand you why it's super difficult to know all the answers, but some of those, right? It's interesting, right?
Yeah, this is exactly the point. London's been around for about 2,000 years. So 2,000 years of history.
Wow.
I don't know everything.
Yeah.
But it has had such a long history and
wow.
listing that it's changed so much over the years. And you can walk down one street and you can see one of the ancient Roman walls of the city. But then just up the street from that will be a building, a huge skyscraper that was only built last year.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It's a very, very strange mix of the new and the old.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's beautiful.
Yes, and I really think, and I mean, here in Spain, parts of the city, and I probably it is in London as well. Parts of the city you cannot change how the building or some of the buildings you cannot touch. Even if you buy the whole property, you cannot change it how it looks. And I think some of those buildings, it's the same in London as well, right?
Yes, we have a lot of buildings like that. Probably two of the best known examples are the Houses of Parliament and the Tower of London. They have to go through so many processes if they even want to put up a lamp or something like that.
Oh.
You really can't make many changes to the structure of the building at all.
Wow, that's interesting. If they want to put a lamp, they have to do a lot of different things and ask permissions and whatever, right?
Yeah, even anything very small. For example, I've tour guided at the Houses of Parliament for a long time, and even things as simple as putting up a sign on the wall. If it's not already a designated area for a sign, you have to go through the right processes to put up a sign, because it's a protected building. If it's a protected building, you must go through the proper procedures, and it might not even be approved. They're very serious about it.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm super in favor of those procedures, because if we let everybody do whatever they want, in a few years from now they will be changing. Oh, today they will change just this little lamp, but 10 years from now, this lamp became like this lamp and these two lamps over here. So I'm pretty. I think that is true, and that you have to maintain those buildings as they are. And if you want to change anything, you have to go through these extremely difficult processes. And yeah, I'm definitely in for them to continue doing that to maintain the history and the culture of these buildings, especially.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Because there's been so much of London's history that's been lost, before they had these processes in place. So, for example, London used to be contained in a big wall, that was put up in Roman times. London was also quite a lot smaller than it is now, so it was possible to put it in a wall. And during the 18th century, a lot of that wall was just knocked down to make way for new buildings. And there are tiny patches of this wall still intact, but most of it doesn't exist anymore, which is so sad because a lot of it was still standing up until the 18th century when they started knocking it down. And you just wonder what it would have felt like to walk through the city today if that wall was
That's
still
true.
intact.
Wow, that's yeah, it would be amazing, right? It's imagine that. And from the Roman times, it's like a long time ago.
Yeah,
But
yeah, a very long time ago.
and from the parts that are still there, how they are, like how they are in terms of conditions, and it's you can actually have an idea about something, or how they look like. Do you know?
You can tell it's a wall or it was part of a wall, but it's definitely deteriorated a lot. Well, it is a very, very old wall, so it would be very deteriorated. But most of it is still, most of the sections that weren't physically knocked down are still standing upright. They just look a little bit deteriorated.
All right, but yeah, I mean, I understand that it could be something very difficult to maintain, but yeah, especially a wall. Right? If it's a building, I think it's quite well. I don't know. I would not say easy because it is super difficult, but in some way, I would say that it's definitely different to maintain a wall than it's a building. So yeah, I think it's something that we might have to look for a little bit more, especially if you have so much history in these parts of those walls, right?
Yeah, at least nowadays they are taking more care of these really important old buildings. It was more that throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, really, London went through a huge period of expansion. Realistically, it went up until the 20th century. Even in the 1960s, London was still expanding rapidly. So for a very long time during that period, they would just knock things down to make way for new buildings. And then, of course, you've got, during the Second World War, there was the Blitz where lots of buildings in London were bombed. And so while that was happening, you would have entire sections of streets being destroyed at the same time. Even Buckingham Palace got bombed a few times during that, but it's still standing, amazingly.
Wow, yeah, I didn't know about it. That's wow.
Yeah, I think it was 8 times it was bombed. But I would have to double check that. But it was certainly a few times. But amazingly, yeah, it's still standing. The king and queen at the time were present and still living in London at Buckingham Palace while this was happening. But they actually quite liked it because they thought that, well, they didn't like it, but they felt that it meant that they could be in sync and be empathetic towards the rest of the people of London, because they actually knew what it was like to live in this danger. Yeah,
it's quite having like the empathy with the people, right? It's not something that happens just with the normal people. It happens with everybody, kind of like that.
Exactly. They didn't feel that just because they were king and queen that they should be exempt from the real terror that a lot of people in London were feeling. So they felt that it was almost their duty to stay with the people who were at that time in the country suffering the most.
Okay. So yeah, that's actually quite different when we think about like queens and governments and like presidents and stuff, kings and queens. It's normally we think like the kind of people that don't want you. Okay, this is happening with you. I don't want to know about it. But this is quite interesting. I quite like it about it. They show some empathy. They are humans at the end, right? So.
Yeah. So certainly some of the past kings and queens have been very, very different, and definitely would have distanced themselves from the public, and indeed in some cases did do that. But as we've come into more modern times, it's almost as though the monarchy has taken on a different role. They are no longer these tyrannical leaders who have complete control over everything and are the most important people in the country above everybody else. They've taken on this more, this softer role, I suppose, as almost wanting to protect rather than rule over. So that's kind of, we started seeing that change in attitude around that time.
No, that's interesting actually, because I think when we think about how the monarchy used to be and how it is today, especially in England, we see that they have a completely different role in society. It's not just rule. It's like they kind of serve as an example sometimes for people. It's quite. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so it's sometimes I think that the royal family, they are extremely. They probably are the ones that can use marketing in the extremely right way. I think they know how they can sell themselves and the whole country through their ability with like to the family and the royal family and the kind of the monarchy that it's not yet a monarchy. I kind of feel like that because I think it's a quite different monarchy and a king and queen, especially the queen, right? It's completely different from here, from Spain, for example. The king, it's kind of, I don't know, it's different. It's completely different. And what do you think about it? It's quite an interesting. I don't know. What do you agree in some way with me, or I'm kind of hallucinating?
No, I think it's a really good point. And I think that comes from lots of reasons. There is a reason why the things have changed between having a king or queen who has complete control over everything to what we have today, where the queen doesn't really have much power. She technically has the power to say yes or no to new laws, but she's never actually said no to a new law. She always says yes. So she doesn't really use that power anyway. So because of that change, what caused this change was a new bill that was signed back in the 17th century, the Bill of Rights. And that is what gave away a lot of the powers that the monarch had. And so we've seen a gradual change since then in the attitude of the royal family. And I think, I do think in part that World War II played a part in this. And I do think that our current queen was probably influenced by her parents and seeing her parents' attitude towards staying with her people. Queen Elizabeth herself, well, she was Princess Elizabeth then, but our current queen was also actively involved in trying to help with the war effort. So I think she grew up very much with this idea that being a monarch was not about this powerful ruler, but was about being with the people. And I think she's now dear on to the rest of the family. Of course, things always change. And, obviously there have been things happening recently with the royal family, but in terms of just the Queen herself, I think she knows how to have a positive impact on the country. And I think she does that well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you in this part, especially. It's she can definitely do an amazing job on doing that. So yeah, and she's now well known around the world because of that. So. And I would like to, since we're going to talk a little bit about London specifically, I would like to ask you. Since we're going talking about London and the royal family, it is true that they still live in the Buckingham Palace or not, or there is some people that say they don't. There's sometimes they do, or some of them are there or not. So it is true or not?
So it's actually a little bit more complicated than that, because well, first of all, most of the royal family do not live in Buckingham Palace. Most of them live in other palaces, St James Palace, Clarence House, lots of different palaces and royal houses around London and around the rest of the country. But in terms of the Queen herself, she is sometimes at Buckingham Palace and she is sometimes not. She considers Buckingham Palace to be her place of work. And she considers Windsor Castle to be her home. So she does live in Buckingham Palace some of the time, but she doesn't consider it to be her home. She also only actually occupies 8 rooms within the entire palace. And there are things in the palace that you wouldn't believe. So you've got a post office, you've got a police station, you've got a swimming pool in the Buckingham Palace.
Inside
the palace. I've never seen it, but it's there. You've got a cinema in Buckingham Palace. There's all sorts of things in the palace that you would never expect to be there. But honestly, she doesn't use most of it. She just stays in the few rooms that she occupies, and then she goes back to Windsor Castle when she's able to.
Wow, and how many rooms do you know? I think I know there's a lot, but
yes, I can't remember the exact number. I think it's over 200. There's a lot of rooms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, I can imagine that, and and it's super. One of the things that is super famous when we talk about Buckingham Palace, it's the guard, right? When they are going to change the guards. I don't know if it's the correct way to say that. And what do you think about these? And I know that it's a super well-known touristic spot. Everybody
my first tip for seeing Changing the Guard is don't go to Buckingham Palace to see it. Everyone assumes that because the actual guards being replaced are the guards who are at Buckingham Palace, people assume, oh, I should go to Buckingham Palace and I'll see them changing. Well, Changing the Guard is an entire procession that goes through the streets surrounding Buckingham Palace, and it ends at Buckingham Palace. You are only seeing the end. Probably won't see because there'll be too many people there. So I would recommend going a little bit before the Changing the Guard is due to take place. And you can check what days and times it's going to take place online. So always check that in advance because it doesn't happen every day. I would recommend going to St James's Palace, and there'll be the new guard, the guard that are going to replace the guard that is at Buckingham Palace. They will come out into this little courtyard. They might even play a song. Every time I have not been lucky enough to hear them playing a song, but I've been told that they play even things like the Star Wars theme tune, just to practice the instruments and be warmed up before they start. And then they will start the procession from St James, actually see the procession rather than starting at the end by starting at Buckingham Palace.
I mean, it's super interesting because when we think about this, we actually think about going there, and I mean, we have to go there, and the guards will be in the Buckingham Palace, and it's super interesting to know that actually we can see and have a much more in depth, kind of experience, going a little bit before. So it's quite interesting actually. And let me ask you, I'm seeing some people here, but I would definitely go through these comments in a few minutes. But I would like to ask you that one thing that you were telling me before we start, that it's about the statue, some statue, the smallest statue, or I don't know. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because I thought it was amazing, super interesting.
Yeah, so the smallest statue in London is on a place called Philpot Lane, and I'll just type that in the chat so people can see it. Philpot Lane. And I'll just have to quickly explain a story into this statue before I explain what the statue actually is. So in the year 1666, there was a huge fire in London that we refer to as the Great Fire of London, and it was a really, really horrific fire. If you want me to go into more detail, I can, but I'll do that after I've spoken about the statue.
Okay.
And because the fire was so devastating, and essentially London had to be rebuilt after this fire, they built a giant monument. It's really huge. Look up and you can barely see the top of it. It's called the Monument, and they built it to commemorate the loss that London had experienced because of this huge fire, the Great Fire of London. And now what happened was this was back in the 17th century, and of course they would have to go up bit by bit when they were building this monument. And once you were up there, you were up there. It was not easy for you to get back down, so you'd be up there the whole day. And you could very easily see if somebody else would have been coming up the monument. So one day, there were two builders at the very top of the monument, the top of where it was at this point. They were working on building the monument, and they stopped for their lunch break. One of the builders had brought a cheese sandwich for his lunch. And so he went to get this sandwich, and the sandwich was missing. And naturally, there was only one other person on top of the monument with him. He accused the other man of having eaten his sandwich. And the other man said, no, I didn't eat your sandwich, what are you talking about? They ended up getting into a physical fight at the top of this very tall statue, this very tall monument, and they ended up falling off the top and plummeting all the way down to the bottom to their deaths. And it was discovered later on by two other builders who were also at the top. But what had actually happened was there was a mouse, and the mouse had eaten the cheese sandwich. And so we now have the smallest statue in London commemorating this story of these two builders who fought over a cheese sandwich. And what it is two tiny mice with a tiny piece of cheese. And I'm just going to get it up on my screen share if I just get the correct slide up.
That is super interesting.
This is the little statue. You can see there's two little mice eating or fighting over a piece of cheese hanging at the end of the building. And just to show you how small this statue is, this is it for scale on a building, on the building that it's on. It's tiny.
Yes, it is.
And it's something you could very easily go past and just not realise it was there. I know people who walked down that street many times and never noticed that statue is there. And it's such a strange story behind it.
No, definitely. I was not expecting that. Definitely. But it is super interesting. And it's something so like small that sometimes you think it's a little detail in the building that it's so. I mean, I was not expecting that, but it's super amazing story. Super amazing. And now I would like to go into probably, as you said before, one of your areas of expertise. And I saw here that people are asking about these specifically. And I told you that it's something that I think it's beautiful as well. And I already saw here people asking about the Big Bang. And the whole building and the area there that's so important. And for example, I saw here a comment that from Luana, and she asked, "I thought the Big Bang was being refurbishment. Can you visit it today? It's open, and if it's what's the story into that?"
Okay, so Big Ben is still being refurbished. Essentially, what was happening was it was starting to lean towards the river. And so there was a danger of it falling into the river. Whoa. So it's been under refurbishment for, it feels like forever at this point. Well, yeah. But it's only been a couple of years. 2021 is when it's due for the renovation work to end. But, of course, with everything that's been going on in the world around COVID, it's possible that might be delayed a little bit because they've had to take a lot more safety precautions. They were already taking a lot of safety precautions, but they're having to take even more. So it could potentially be pushed a little bit more than that. Now, before the renovation work, Big Ben was actually incredibly difficult to get into because it was, at that time, only open to UK residents, and just to note, not British citizens, UK residents. So you don't have to be British, you just had to be living in the UK.
In the UK. Okay.
And even then you had to book 6 months in advance to get a visit because it was really in demand. So what's going to happen after refurbishment? Initially, it's still going to be UK residents, but they want to open it up internationally so that anyone can go up. When that's going to happen is not a question I can answer right now. But the idea is that we want, or they want to open it up to as many people as possible. because it is. I have actually been up Big Ben myself, and it is an experience. But you can see the rest of the Houses of Parliament. Right now, again, due to COVID, they're not running tours, but they do normally run tours of the rest of the building. And you can get pretty close to Big Ben, not right next to it, but you can get pretty close to the outside and look up at it. So it's interesting to do.
Definitely. I mean, if you were in London, you have to at least get as close as possible to that. And try at least, right?
Yeah.
And the whole like in the whole House of Parliament, and how it's actually, what is the story behind that? What is the, because I saw here a lot of people ask about the Big Bang, and but it has all the House of Parliament around it, right? It's part of the building, right? And so what is happening there? What is the story from there? So
do you mean of the actual physical building or of Parliament itself?
No, maybe both. I don't know. What do you think? Tell us what your area expertise and what do you know? Some interesting things. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll start with what happened in 1834, because the building that, as you see it today, including Big Ben, only exists because of what happened in 1834. So, on the official name for the Houses of Parliament is the Palace of Westminster, and there used to be the Palace of Westminster sitting on that site. It was still the Houses of Parliament who were working there at this point in time, 1834, but the building itself looked completely different. And so what I just have to explain another little point in history, is that before paper became very cheap to produce, when a transaction took place, instead of writing down all the different things that had been bought and how much they cost on a piece of paper, you would have a stick, and you would mark notches in the stick and break the stick in half. The person who had bought items would keep one half, the person who had sold items would keep the other half. And these were called tally sticks. And this was essentially an old form of receipt keeping. But what happened was paper became very, very cheap to produce. It made much more sense to do what we do nowadays, where we write. Well, nowadays it's printed. But when we have a physical paper copy of what's been bought and sold. But we had lots and lots of these old tally sticks that now were obsolete. They were not being used at all. And the Palace of Westminster had quite a large collection of these that they had accumulated. And they made a very strange decision, again, back in 1834. They decided to get rid of all of these tally sticks by burning them in the basement of the Palace of Westminster. Now, the reason they did that was because that was where the fire that heated the palace was, and they thought, oh, great, we've got some free fuel. But the people who were in charge of putting these sticks onto the heating, onto this fire, they put them on very, very quickly, all at once, even though they had been told not to do that. And so the whole place went up in flames. And it very, very quickly destroyed most of the Palace of Westminster. There were a few parts that survived. So there's a part called Westminster Hall, which exists. That is nearly 1,000 years old. And amazingly, it did survive this fire. But almost everything else had to be rebuilt. And so that's why we have the Palace of Westminster along with Big Ben as it stands today, because this was the new design that they came up with to replace the old Palace of Westminster. And honestly, it does work a lot better, because the old palace was originally a palace. It was where the kings and queens lived it wasn't set up for Parliament.
Uh-huh.
New building, they built rooms to have a specific purpose for parliamentary business, either to be a debating chamber or a committee room, libraries. The different rooms all had specific purposes. So the building as it stands does actually work better than the original palace worked, but that's why we have the building as it stands today.
Wow, that's amazing. And how I mean, when we keep hearing those stories, we keep thinking about how much of the history that we already lost for some very like some stupid ideas, right? In some way, but
Yeah,
and in how
absolutely, it was a very silly mistake.
I mean, imagine that those are some of the things that we already know, right? So we know a little bit about this history and what happened, but imagine how many palaces out there and how many other things like could still hear, and it's not because of those little things that makes. I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing. But I'm quite glad that they did that, and it became what it is today. So
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have Big Ben today if it wasn't for this, because Big Ben was a new addition when they were building the new palace. And actually, just one little thing that I should point out is that technically Big Ben is not the name tower. So the tower is called the Elizabeth Tower after Queen Elizabeth. Big Ben is actually the name of the massive bell inside the tower. You know, the one that goes bong.
Yeah.
Bong. Is that bell. But for some reason, we started calling the entire tower Big Ben.
The Big Ben.
But that's not actually accurate.
So it's the Elizabeth Tower.
Yes. I'll type it in the chat as well so that people can see. Yeah, the Elizabeth Tower is the proper name.
I didn't know about it. That's one of the things that I didn't know about it. It's super interesting. It's something that I was not expecting at all. and when you were in, you were actually able to see the Big Bang as it is.
Yes, I had to have earplugs in because I went up when it would chime. But it's incredible, absolutely incredible, and it's really interesting seeing the way that everything works inside, and the view from up there as well is just. But there are also other places in London where you can get a really good view, not just Big Ben. I don't know if you've heard of the Sky Garden.
The Sky Garden, actually, no.
Put it in the chat as well. Yeah. The Sky Garden is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a garden pretty much in the sky. It's in a building called the Walkie-Talkie bit. We call it the Walkie-Talkie building. Shaped like a walkie-talkie. I'm going to type that. That's not the proper name of it, but I can never remember the proper name because nobody calls it by the proper name.
Now I already know that you guys change all the real names. Okay.
Yeah, basically, just all the buildings have nicknames. That's not entirely true, but we do like nicknames. So at the very top of this scraper, there's a massive area which is a garden, and you can go up there for free. You do need to book a time slot, and they do tend to book out in advance. But you can go up there for free, and you have some of the best views in London. There are some even better views, but you have to pay for those in other places, whereas this is free. So if you are going to London on a budget, then it's a good option.
I saw here that I saw that people asked as well about the London Eye. It's something. It's like that. That huge. I think it's London Eye, right?
The London Eye.
It is. It's that. It's one of the things that you said in the beginning, that you can see some very old and medieval, some castles and some very interesting historic places, and some very new ones. And these, I think, it's this contrast of the new with the old as well. I think, and I think it became like beautiful there, and probably they have amazing view from up there as well.
Yeah, definitely the London Eye has some of the best views of London. And it's a very strange sensation being on it. I've been on it a couple of times because it's moving so slowly that you don't really notice it's moving. You also don't quite feel like you're on solid ground. So it's a very strange feeling.
Wow.
But yeah, it's again another example of where you've got something very new next to something very old. And you can definitely see that when you're at the very top. You can see all of these contrasts between old and new. It's got some brilliant views from the London Eye.
Yeah, definitely. I saw in I don't know where, but they're saying that it takes around like 30 minutes, half an hour, just to do these, like the complete trip, let's say like that. And it's like that. So that's why it's like going super slow. I was thinking that they were like, I don't know why, but so I didn't know that they were going super slow. That's interesting. Probably it's a very interesting experience.
Yeah, I would recommend doing it once. You probably don't need to do it again once you've done it once. Though I have done it more than once. But it's an interesting experience. And yeah, it's also quite fun when you're getting onto it, because it is moving. So you have to get onto it really quickly in order to make sure that you actually get into your little capsule that you're in.
Well, so it doesn't stop. It's you have to go. They're like arriving, the ones who are coming out, and you have to go in. It's like you have to be very fast, right? I don't know.
Yeah. So they have one area where you get off, and then another area where you get on. So there's not a clash between people getting on and off. But yes, you have to get off quickly, and then you have to get on quickly. Because it's moving, they don't stop it. They only stop it for wheelchair users, because in that case it's not safe to get on quickly. But otherwise they don't stop it, so you just have to get on.
Well, at least they stop for some people. So,
yeah.
And I would like to ask. It's a place that I think it's always when I see things about London, and it's a place called Tower of London, and they say that they host all the crown jewels there, or something like that, right? And I think it's an amazing building. It's so beautiful, and I don't know. Do you know something about this place, or what is? What is that? Is that the jewels where they host the jewels of the crown? Is that correct? Or I don't know. I saw that in one other place, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think
you're right. That is where the crown jewels are kept.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Apart from one day a year, the crown jewels go to the Houses of Parliament, and that's for something called the State Opening of Parliament. I'm just going to type that in the chat as well. The State Opening of Parliament, which is when the Queen goes to Parliament. So for that day, the crown jewel go to the Houses of Parliament. So if you want to visit the Tower of London, don't go that day because you won't see the crown jewels.
Wow.
But otherwise, yes, you can go into the Tower of London and you can see the crown jewels, which are really a magnificent collection of jewels, and it's just breathtaking seeing it.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And that's not what. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was curious about why they take out all the jewels from on this day that you were saying that this is state opening of Parliament. Why they do that? There's a reason for that.
Essentially, it's tradition, particularly because the Queen wears the crown when she's at Parliament. This is a very, very old tradition. Essentially, back when the King or Queen did have all the power, they would choose when Parliament would sit and when Parliament would not sit. And so the state opening of Parliament was officially them opening Parliament and saying, yes, you may sit and you may debate now. Nowadays, although technically the Queen does this, technically she's opening Parliament and saying, yes, you can sit. Realistically, she's not the one deciding it. It's very much the Houses themselves who are deciding. But because this tradition has gone on for such a long time, they still follow the same ceremonial procedures that they have followed for a very long time. And as such, the crown jewels come with the Queen so that she can wear her crown, she can have the crown jewels with her while she is officially opening Parliament.
So interesting. I think it's important to maintain those traditions, even though it's more like today probably is more entertainment, or I don't know if I don't know if they're putting on television and all those stuff, but probably it's more like to maintain the tradition, as you said. So it's super interesting. I think it's important to maintain some of those traditions.
Yeah, and it's also just interesting. It's interesting to watch. It's interesting to learn, and it's a sign of some of the old times, some of the past of the country. So it's quite. I think there's a lot of good reasons to continue with the state opening of Parliament.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's tradition. Why? Sometimes we have traditions that came medieval. Like we're not killing people. We're not. We're not gladiators anymore. But some of those traditions, I think it's super important to maintain it, and it's like to see and remember how actually it works from like thousands of years like that. So why we just want to erase that? No, I think it's important to maintain those traditions. Super important, actually. And let's see.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, continue. I was like,
I was just going to say that it's actually quite nice that we can have these traditions without some of the nastier elements that the royal family was involved in years past, where people were terrified of the monarchy. It's nice that though the elements of those traditions that are not really horrific can still exist today, and we can actually appreciate them without all of the horrific things that happened in the past.
Definitely agree. Couldn't agree more with you. It's I don't know. It's something that if I'm in favor of, if those traditions are not like hurting anybody or hurting any species, whatever. So if it's just a tradition, how you were dressed before and how you dress now, some of those, like, it's more like a theater, right? You imagine, I'm imagining the Queen saying, now you may debate, or something like that. And I'm imagining more like a theater, something like it's entertainment, it's interesting, it's history at the same time. So it's I don't know, I quite liked it. I quite like it, actually. It's super interesting. And I would like to in the places that I always see in London. I think a lot of people as well. It's it's the bridge in front of the Big Bang in the Parliament. What bridge is that?
The bridge that's right in of Big Ben, or the other end.
Uh-huh.
So the bridge that's right next to Big Ben is Westminster Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll write that in the chat as well. Westminster Bridge. And the one at the other end, and the end opposite to Big Ben, is Lambeth Bridge. And you a little interesting fact about the two.
Yeah, sure.
So within the Houses of Parliament, you've got the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And the House of Commons, their official colour is green. House of Lords, their official colour is red. Westminster Bridge is nearest to the House of Commons, and Lambeth Bridge is nearest to the House of Lords. So those bridges are actually the colours of the houses they're nearest. So Westminster Bridge is green, and Lambeth Bridge is red. And you often don't realise that until you look at both the bridges together. And you notice this sudden colour difference between them.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know about it as well. I thought it was just you can walk through those bridges.
Yeah, they're open to the public to walk through, and drive over as well.
Mm-hmm.
And also if you go along the embankment on the opposite side to the Houses of Parliament, that's where you can really see the colour difference between the two bridges. I'd probably recommend going to the embankment by the river rather than actually on the bridges.
I will definitely research more about it because I'm kind of curious. Probably there's some photos. I would definitely Google it because it's. I didn't know it. It's super interesting as well. Okay. Probably there is, right? I think people already took pictures of those showing the different colors, right?
Yeah, there are definitely definitely pictures out there of the two, but it's still not quite as impressive as seeing it in real life. But yeah, there are definitely pictures out there.
That's. I would definitely research more about it, definitely, because it's. I'm kind of curious, but I'm not going to do that right now. I was starting to do that, but I'm not going to do it right now. And I mean, we are already in almost 1 hour, and we answered a few questions today, and I will probably end with last one here that he asked something actually very interesting, and it's from Juan. So hi Juan again, and he's asking what kind of tourism we can enjoy visiting London. So, and what kind of tourism do you think it's more? I'm adding in some part of this question as well now. And what kind of tourism do you think it's sustainable for the city now, especially now that we're seeing that all the tourism and the travel industry is collapsing? What do you give some of, especially you work with that as well? So I don't know what kind of tourism you can enjoy visiting in London, and this. What do you think about the if it's sustainable or not, and what can we improve in this business?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So in terms of the types of tourism that you can enjoy in London, most types of tourism, probably the only thing you can't really do in London is any kind of extreme sports, like adventure activities. That kind of tourism you'd need to go outside of London. But whatever you're interested in, you'll probably find it in London. You've got the really historical side, so if you're into your history, you've got more buildings than you can possibly visit in one visit. You've got the trendier side of London, so if you like visiting really trendy places, fashionable places, you've got shops, you've got bars, you've got cafes, you've got all sorts of places. and some really strange places as well. For example, there's a crazy golf course that's been made out of items that people threw away, and it's called the Junkyard Golf Club.
Interesting.
I can actually spell it correctly. The Junkyard Golf Club. So you can do things like that, which are quite trendy. You've got actually a lot of nature in London. So if you're really into your nature, there are some of the most beautiful parks in the country in London. There's also, I'm going to type in the name of another park. It's one of my favourite parks, Beckenham Place Park. And you can actually go wild water swimming in Beckenham Place Park during the summer months, not during the winter months. It gets very, very cold here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can, but it's you probably will not be a comfortable swimming. It's not.
I wouldn't go swimming in the UK, outdoor swimming in the UK in winter, but it gets very cold here in winter. So you've got almost every kind of tourism that you can imagine. And if you do want to ask about a particular type of tourism, then feel free to type and I can say, yes, you could do this, assuming that I know.
I just saw here from, for example, Gabriel, he just said that also there's a lot of museums which are excellent and very interesting places for visiting. For example, the British Museum, as he put it here. So, yeah, museums are very amazing places to go in London as well.
Yeah, we've got some incredible museums here.
Yeah.
My favourite is the Natural History Museum, which is just, I love it. It's got so much different information in there, so many different topics in there. But there's lots of museums, even really specific museums. Like there's a museum just about old films that you can go and see old films at this museum. So it's if you whatever your interest is, you will almost certainly find a museum that suits that interest in London.
Of course, London. It's they have like everything. Probably it's a city that can offers you almost everything that you wanted, that you were looking for. So yeah.
Yeah, almost everything.
Yeah, almost.
Not quite. And actually, I said no adventure sports and that kind of thing, but actually there is a place in London where you can do that called Go, which is in Battersea, and that's like a treetop adventure. So you climb up into the trees, and then you do lots of different ropes between the trees and climbing between the trees, which is quite good fun as well. So actually, even that type of tourism, there's still a little bit there that you can do.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so you've got almost everything in London.
Of course, yeah.
But in terms of whether it's sustainable, I do think that it will be sustainable simply because there are so many people who really want to come to London, and even within the UK, there are lots of people who want to come to London, and it's just at the moment, it's on pause. Yeah. Same with tourism in most places, it's on pause at the moment. But I do think that tourism in London will become much more lively again in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think we will have a lot of. It will be a very different world if we just stop to visit other countries and visit and know other cultures. So I think we will have a lot more problems if this kind of things happen. And I definitely agree with you. I think we'll come back. Everything is kind of in pause here as well. For example, I don't know, Madrid, it's a city that it's bumping. And now we see here now it's almost, you see a few ones walking around, but it's kind of these very in comparison what it was supposed to be now, especially in the summertime, it is yeah, it's something that I hope that it comes back soon enough for everybody to start keep experiencing and keep learning from different cultures and actually give people their jobs back as well, because there are a lot of people unemployed right now, and in the tourism sector it's a place that it helps the economy in general. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The tourism industry is one of the most hard hit industries at the moment by the whole situation. And that's not just in London, that's everywhere where tourism is popular. But I'm sure that things will perk back up again.
Yeah.
Even if we have slight changes, like if we have to wear a mask, or if we have certain places where there's a clear barrier between people, we will get back to having tourism.
Yeah, definitely agree. And we will come back. It's just a matter of time. So yeah, it will be everything fine. And I think we already saw here a lot. We answer some few questions, but we will definitely. I think we have much more things to talk about London, and especially we can even do one of those sessions to talk about specific places in the UK in general, because there are a lot of different things on the UK, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I would like to, if you guys have any more like ideas or questions for things that you want to know about the UK in general, just put in the comments, and we will try to. And probably we're doing more of one more live session with that, just talking about like specific places in the UK. If you guys have any idea or something interesting that you want to talk about in the UK, just put in the comments, and we will discuss that as well. And I think it was a great session. Thank you again for having us here, Sophie. It was amazing to share your experience and all your history and these tips, amazing tips, just amazing. If you guys just print screen here, all these comments here, because it's amazing. And thank you very much for having us here one more time.
Thank you for inviting me, Tiago, and thank you everyone for coming and for all of your comments and your questions.
That's nice. So guys, see you the next time, and hope you guys enjoy it, and put the like here button if you like it. And one more time, if you want to have a class with her, there's a link here in the description that you can have a class with Sophie. So please feel free to ask questions, put comments, and we'll do our best to answer those, okay? See you next live.